Why, hello there, and welcome to this video. If you are here, then you clicked this video because it's about Wuthering Waves, and you want to know more about Wuthering Waves before the release here on the 22nd of this month, which is like a week away from when I'm recording this video, which is super exciting. This game is something that I've been looking forward to for actual years at this point, which is kind of funny, but also just I want to go through the lead up of this game and like go over the company that's, developing the game and stuff like that. Kind of just go over everything that you need to know leading up to the launch so that we can have like a conversation and so that you can be informed and stuff like that. So that's gonna be great. I plan on playing this game at launch. I'm gonna stream it. I'm gonna make videos on it. So if you want to see that content, that juicy content, then there's only one thing. Well, maybe two things for you to do. Maybe three things. Okay, maybe three things. There's like the subscribe button, hit the like thingy, and then if you want to comment, that would also help with the algorithm and all that wonderful stuff. So anyway, point is, Wuthering Waves. This game is something that I think has the potential to compete with a game like Genshin Impact. And there's a lot of reasons why that's important, but the main reason why that's important is because competition is good for any market, right? And Genshin has sat atop its throne for years and years and years with barely any challenges levied at it. Now, I know there's like Tower of Fantasy and a couple other games and stuff like that, but like realistically, Genshin has like a huge market share that hasn't really been challenged by anybody else. And so this game has the opportunity to do that, and I think that that's good both for Genshin but also for the future market of these kinds of games. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, so first things first, we need to talk about the company that's developing this game. Like, who are they? What have they done thus far? All that stuff. And this is going to be a very short conversation. This game is being developed by Kuro Games, and it's a small development studio based out of China, and they have only got one game out right now, and it was released globally in 2019. It's called Punishing Gray Raven, and it's also known as PGR, just for shorthand, just for the sake of ease of talking about it. But essentially, I started playing this game actually when it released global launch, and I played it for like 6 to 8 months before, moving on to other things and stuff. But it's a really good game. I do highly recommend it. I think that it's got a number of things going for it that kind of help us get a glimpse at what the company's values are and like kind of like what their focus is when they're developing games. And that's why I think it's important to look at this kind of stuff. So we're gonna look at some media real fast, just kind of give you a glimpse at like what PGR is like what the gameplay is like and stuff like that, to kind of get an idea of like what they did prior to making Wuthering Wave. And yeah, it's actually funny because it's got a similar setting and stuff that we're gonna see in Wuthering Waves. Like, PGR is very sci-fi oriented, post-apocalyptic oriented, and that's the same kind of atmosphere that they're going for in Wuthering Wave. So there is some crossover there. But yeah, let's get into this video. All right, so here we are, and there's gonna be some music with this video, so I'm gonna try to keep it pretty quiet so that hopefully I don't get like copyright struck or anything like that, but I'll also try to talk over it a little bit so that hopefully it doesn't really screw me over, but we shall see. All right, so this is one of the newer characters, and you're gonna see a lot of stuff happening on screen you're not gonna understand. Just ignore like all these colors and shapes at the bottom and stuff like that. That's just like the combat skill system. This is a boss fight against, they're called the twins, and the player has this slowdown power where if you do like a perfect dodge, it slows down everyone on the field and you get to like do super strong skills and stuff like that, right? Well, these bosses can do that back to you. So they can perfect dodge you and slow you down, which is really cool. And that's what you see happening kind of back and forth in this fight. It's obviously very flashy. This is like anime power fantasy, the game. It's very, very flashy, but it's extremely fun. It's very satisfying. The game has a lot of room for skill expression, which is something that I value a lot in RPGs. I don't want my RPG to be like a number simulator, right? Like, I don't want to just plug and play numbers. I want to feel like I'm an active participant in the fights and stuff like that. So it's always really exciting for me when a game has a lot of skill expression. like this game obviously does. But yeah, this is one of the coolest boss fights in the game. Super epic, very challenging. They have a lot of health. You're fighting 2 bosses at the same time, which is, you know, twice the boss. Now, normally this is a team-based game. You normally have like 3 teammates, or like your on-field character plus 2 other characters. But this is a solo kind of gameplay showcase, so you're only seeing 1 character on the field. Otherwise, you'd be seeing swapping characters and even more going on, which is just like obviously a lot. So yeah, you kind of see them going back and forth here. Super cool. Honestly, super cool. The Devil May Cry music is super fitting for this kind of game. You know, it's like that super hype action music. All right, let's go back. Face cam. So that video was by Blanc, by the way. I'll put the little thing up here or whatever. Go subscribe to them if you want. I think there's a lot of people that make really cool like skill expression content for Punishing Gray Raven, and I expect to see a lot of that as well with Wuthering Waves. So that's super exciting. But yeah, this just gives you a brief glimpse into that game. Punishing Gray Raven is still successful. It's still going to this day. They're still adding updates. They do a lot of content for the game, and if you want to check it out, honestly, I highly recommend it. Besides the combat, obviously it's a gacha game. You know, there's that little thing right there. But I will say that the gacha in it is pretty dang easy to work with. Like, it's actually pretty forgiving in terms of like the chances of everything. And when I was playing the game, if you're free to play, you can earn enough currency to like get every new character as they release, which is like really nice. I love to see that kind of thing where like free to play can kind of keep up with the game. You know, they don't feel like they're constantly falling behind or having to make insanely hard choices or whatever. Now, of course, there's the caveat that like you could skip a character and then put more resources into a different character if you wanted to, but PGR is kind of like a team-based game where you want to build different, like you want to build a fire team, a dark team, a whatever, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. So yeah, overall, that is just a brief look at PGR. Now we are going to talk about Wuthering Waves. Wuthering Waves was announced in 2022, and it has been in development for 2 to 4 years, I would say. I don't really have the exact dates or anything on that, but I would say that they probably started working on it close to about when, I would say actually probably 4 or 5 years is probably development time for Wuthering Waves. I think they started working on it shortly after Punishing Gray Raven came out, and that's interesting to think about as well. But yeah, it is going to be essentially the same kind of atmosphere of post-apocalyptic sci-fi gacha RPG, but it's open world. PGR is very mission based. Like you have the menus and stuff, and then you click what mission you want to play, you play the mission, you load back into the menus and that kind of thing. And I've never been a huge fan of that. I love the immersive elements of an open world. And while I don't think that companies usually do that very well, I think that works really well for like a gacha game. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like there's a lot more room for interactivity and stuff like that when you're playing a character in an open world and stuff like that. And that's something that I think is really important for a gacha game. So anyway, okay, let's look at the first ever kind of like piece of media, big piece of media that was released about Wuthering Waves.
Their Calumet arrived without a sign.
Alrighty.
Their world shattered without so much as a sigh.
So since this was like sort of like the big first piece of media released about this game, you know, looking at this, you kind of get an idea of like art direction, stuff like that. I thought some of these visual effects were really cool. This almost reminds me of like what you would experience in a dream, you know? Like you have those kinds of dreams where you're just running away from some like big bad thing, right? A little bit of Mirror's Edge right there.
What is dead will stay buried. Except nothing ever truly dies. Which part of you will you save?
But the music was really cool here.
What is left untouched by all this pain? Let the echo be heard.
So yeah. So that was like an exciting piece of media to see. Obviously, that didn't really give us very much to go on in terms of like anything other than just like, wow, that was certainly a vibe, wasn't it? But it kind of gives you an idea of like what was the concept of this game, like, right? Like some kind of big world-ending event, having to try to fight your way through that, all the stuff that goes into that and stuff like that. So now we're gonna move into another video, which is a gameplay trailer released leading up to the first closed beta test. So within the same year that video was released, they had their first closed beta test where they basically let people play what they had done up to that point to get the feedback and stuff like that, so they could see kind of what everyone's thoughts and stuff were about the game. So we're gonna go ahead and watch that real quick. Alrighty, so now we're seeing actual in-game footage, right? So this is like what the game looked like when we very first saw like in-game footage of it. And you can see, obviously looks very similar to what we saw in that first video in terms of like aesthetic and everything like that. We see some urban structures, you see overgrowth, it's obviously post-apocalyptic. Colors are very like muted, there's not a lot of saturation, it's that very kind of like muddy, muted kind of like serious vibe color palette or whatever. And then now it's showing like different characters, some freeze frames, and then they're gonna show some gameplay here. Right. So like some of these animations look pretty cool. It's kind of see like what the combat in brief looks like. It's very like hack and slash with skills and stuff, kind of similar to what we're used to in Genshin. We see some like brief glimpses of cutscenes, but we're not really seeing anything definitive about any story elements or anything like that. Like we're really just seeing like in-game renders.
Rover.
And then we're the rover. Okay, and then I do want to watch one more, which kind of just shows some character teasers. Because that first one showed a lot of like in-game environments and combat, but didn't really show a lot of the character design. So these were sort of like some of the initial character designs that we saw when the game first was announced.
Got it. There's always a shortcut for a hero. My bad. I'll meet you there.
But I also feel like you sort of got to get to see a little bit of like some of like the more character based. I accidentally skipped a little bit, so I had to rewind it.
It's all Anka's effort. Try a spoon at least.
On second thought, I'm gonna.
Is that edible?
All right, so those are sort of like just some things that we saw before the closed beta test that were like our initial first looks at Wuthering Waves in the in-game and stuff like that. So then the first closed beta test happened, and I did not apply for it because I'm very, very good at doing this YouTube thing. And actually, like, there is sort of a reason for it. Like, I feel like doing a bunch of beta tests often kills the joy or the excitement leading up to a game. Like, I'm really excited to play Wuthering Waves because I haven't touched it. I haven't even, like, I haven't played a single second of the game, so I don't know anything about it. Like, if I played the second closed beta test, I feel like if I'd done both closed beta tests, you know, maybe I wouldn't be as excited for the game releasing. Maybe I would be excited, I don't know. But for me, it's just like, I don't really feel like it's fun for me to like play through the beginning of a game a whole bunch of times just so I can like see it early or whatever, you know what I mean? So anyway, as I said, the first closed beta test happened. It happened. It transpired. A lot of people were streaming it. A lot of people were giving their thoughts and their feedback. There was a lot of discussion about the game, and overall, people were mixed opinions on it. I would say some people were like, this game looks really cool. I like the combat focus. It looked more combat focused than something like Genshin. So maybe, you know, like, especially with the first closed beta test, the way that it was received, it was sort of like, oh, this game is focusing on the stuff that Genshin's not focusing on. Like, it's not trying to compete on story, it's trying to compete more in like the action element of the game. But then we didn't really hear much of anything from the developers for quite a while until we had another video release leading up to the second closed beta test. This video is called Development Interview, What We've Been Doing During the Past 9 Months. And it essentially goes into the fact that, like, you'll see, but like the developers got all their feedback from the first closed beta test, and we're going to see how exactly did they respond to that. Alrighty, so there's going to be some subtitles, and I will be doing some translating. So I'm going to turn the volume down a smidge. That way I'm not like talking at the same volume as this guy. Okay, so it's developer talk, and we have a couple guests. They are, I think they're just both influencers. Yeah, they're both content creators. So it's been 6 months since the last closed beta test. So this was 6 months after the first closed beta test, and they kind of went radio silence after that first closed beta.
同时，我们也非常想和大家分享一下明朝到底在过去这一段时间里发生了怎样的变化。其实我最好奇还是明朝项目组内部是怎么看待上一次的测试的，因为我们在玩家社区能看见各种很热烈的反响，当然有正面的。Essentially bringing up there were a lot of positive and negative comments, and so how did the development team react to that? We care deeply about every single feedback from our players. So this is going to be a consistent theme you see throughout this video. Them talking about how they care about the feedback. They listened. They read Discord. They went on social media and they read what people were actually saying and thinking and feeling about the game. I imagine you felt the pressure, and they said, yeah, the development team were distressed during the previous test. On the one hand, we received precious feedback regarding aspects with room for development. On the other hand, these critical remarks did tighten our nerves as we probed more into them. 作为玩家，我觉得明朝的方向，我个人很喜欢的。非常感谢你的认可，其实也有挺多漂泊者对明朝的大方向。So it's our greatest pleasure to have the approval of our players. So talking about how they care about, you know, getting feedback from the players and how they feel about the game. 是因为有了漂泊者们的所有的这些反馈跟建议，我们才能更努力的把明朝做到更好。OK， 那么说完客套话，我们还是回到玩家们。So I do want to pause real quick and just say, like, I think it's really important that, like, we just mention how, like, the fact that they are talking about this, the fact that they read the feedback, the fact that the company is directly addressing that feedback is huge, because not every company does that. If anything, I would say that, like, one of the biggest
weaknesses of Hoyoverse and Genshin Impact and stuff like that is that they don't really communicate as directly as I think that they should with their fan base, with the people playing the game. Like, a lot of people have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the game, and oftentimes it's not entirely clear what Hoyoverse thinks about those things. They don't often come out and, you know, say like, hey, we hear that you're talking about the specific weakness of the game and we plan to address that. They don't really say, hey, we don't really have a solution for that. Like, they don't say anything. They just sort of like leave it up to your imagination as to what they're gonna do with the game, which is a little iffy. Like, it does have some obvious benefits that they don't jump into the middle of drama that happens every time there's drama. You know, you don't need to jump in as development team every time something is happening, because not every bit of drama is actually important, right? But there are things that do happen that are important to pay attention to. So again, it's just really good to see that. So after a year of development, what can we expect from the new Wuthering Waves, is what he asked. So we focused on everything that our players raised concerns about. One of the most brought up issues was the color palette. So this is something I mentioned. It was dull, kind of depressing, a little post-apocalyptic, a little muddy, a little dark and muted colors, that kind of thing. And so we have prioritized improving the environment design, adding more details, adding more color, assets, enhancing rendering and shaders. So they want to maintain the heavy post-apocalyptic atmosphere while elevating the overall appearance, which I think makes sense. They also added some atmospheric stuff into the game, like weather effects and stuff like that, atmospheric effects that help like convey a mood. So in the safety of cities, we create a relaxed and vibrant atmosphere, whereas in other areas you might feel like there's more danger and stuff like that. So they also prioritized animation details, accurately portray the world of Wuthering Waves. Right, so they were inspired by animes, you know, basically anime series to do like whatever. So essentially they're working on making sure every platform has good fidelity. And so with brighter colors and improved graphics, it looks a lot better. The visuals are comfortable and noticeable. Any new content in the upcoming closed beta test is asked. So talking about, we add realistic weather changes such as floating clouds, thunderstorms, stars at night, stuff like that. Abnormal weather phenomena. So they redesigned a lot of open world interest points. That was one of the complaints in the first closed beta test, is that the world was a little too simple. There wasn't enough going on in the open world, and they wanted to see some more interesting elements in the open world. And I think that that's important too, to kind of like that's something Genshin does really well, is they create set pieces. Like when you go and you stand on a certain vantage point in Genshin and you look out from it, it's just so scenic. Like there are so many like mountaintops and vistas that you can find in Genshin. It's just stunningly gorgeous, right? And you know for a fact that was part of the design of the area, that they wanted it to be beautiful like that. Like they wanted to create an environment where you look out and you just see like you see what you see, you know, like that's very intentionally designed to be that way. So it's good to see that they're adding in. You're gonna see a lot of this stuff is very much like we polished, we refined, we focused in on details, on small details. And I think that that's what really could make this game compete with Genshin, is because Genshin does do that in certain ways, not in every way, but there are a lot of small details put into certain aspects of that game that kind of make it feel like there's this care put into it that's like really like, wow, there's a lot going on within this certain system, which makes me feel like the developers put a lot of care and time into this. So new dungeons have been added to the closed beta test. So they're tied to specific characters and their side stories. So those dungeons are specifically designed to give you like a tailored story experience for each character, which is interesting and cool. That's a cool concept. So now they're going to talk about story. There were a lot of heated discussions among players. You know, some people kind of wanted a minimal story, and some people wanted more out of it. And the story in the first closed beta test was very, very minimal. Like it was very sporadic. It wasn't very connected. It was very loose and stuff. And some people were like, yeah, no, that's, like I said earlier, they're not trying to compete with Genshin on story. They're trying to compete on something else like combat, which is one of Genshin's strong and weak points. Genshin has amazing combat, but the game is actually not very combat focused, which is kind of like one of the pain points for the community of the Genshin Impact community, is that we, you know, a lot of people that play Genshin want to see more combat oriented content because the combat in the game is so fun and so satisfying to learn and experience and build teams and all that stuff, that it's just like kind of sad that you just have like Abyss and then you're kind of just like, that's it. You know what I mean? So for our content heavy game, he's talking about redoing this story. Would have been a tough call, as it meant undoing all that we had already achieved with the mission dynamics and the characters, performances, voice acting and stuff. And you got to really consider that, like, gamers do this thing where we're like, hey, this sucks, change it. And we don't always think about what goes into that. And sometimes like people say like, oh, this story element sucks, change it. It's like, okay, but like there's voice acting, there's writing, there's concepts, there's a lot of stuff that goes into these development processes that we don't think about. And so like that's something that I'm sure that they had to very seriously consider when they were considering like how important is the story to us? Is it worth redoing all this? However, upon reviewing feedback and conducting an internal assessment, it became clear that revamping the main story was necessary, so they decided to go ahead and do it. Goal was to completely revise the story for a better player experience. We can't share details yet, but we're excited to say that 90% of the story has been completely rewritten. That's an impressive percentage. Bunch of game resources were remade too, scripts, voice acting, quest structures, certain art assets, all the cinematics. Had to rework with a brand new storyline. The general idea was to start revising the bottom of our world building concept. Then the character backstories. So sort of like just like kind of redoing everything from the bottom up. They start with like the basic, how does this world work? What are the, you know, like what are the base kind of like world mechanics, and then move into like each character's actual, who are they? What do they do in the world? And then move into the story from there. And I think that that's actually a really good way to develop a story, because sometimes people start with a plot and then they try to like build a setting around that plot. And I think it feels more organic when it's like, oh, there's already a world that exists and here's a plot that's happening in that world. Like here's a story that you would be witnessing if you were just like an observer in this world. So then they went ahead and did side quest stuff. It was not an easy decision. I imagine it wasn't. They only had 6 months to make all these adjustments. When we had been developing our game for 2 to 3 years. So yeah, I'd already been in development for 2 to 3 years when they went ahead and made all these changes. Under a lot of pressure, we knew it was the right thing to do. I think it shows a lot of like, they really want to make this game as good as they can possibly make it, and they want to apologize for the stuff like that. But that's important to them. Like, they don't want this to just be another game, because like, you have to keep in mind this development studio is extremely small. Everything that they're doing, like, they're probably betting everything on Wuthering Waves. If Wuthering Waves does not do well, then I don't know if this development studio has a very strong future. I don't know if they'll be able to survive if Wuthering Waves doesn't do well. So like, I'm sure they have a lot riding on it, and you know, there's like, these decisions can be really important. Like, on one hand, do they want to put the resources in to do all this stuff? But on the other hand, like, what if they don't? Can they afford not to? You know what I mean? So interesting. I feel moved as a player to see the devs put in so much effort. Yeah, me too. I feel like that says a lot about their work ethic and what they really want to achieve. They don't want to just make money. They want to do everything they can to make the game good. And we just hope the players will like it. It's another good sentiment saying, hey, we want it to be a good game for the players. We want the players to be happy. Listening to feedback and making adjustments. So again, welcoming all kinds of feedback and suggestions, stuff and things and stuff. Yeah, so like, they were traveling around to conventions, and players were trying out the new builds as they were working on it. There were differences in character design, so we watched that video about the character designs, right? And one of the common complaints about character designs from the first closed beta test was that they weren't like, there just wasn't enough polish, enough attention to detail. They looked a bit too generic. There just wasn't enough going on. It wasn't enough personality. And I think that if you go back and watch that thing, or if you remember from what we watched recently, yeah, I would agree that the characters, like, they do stick out. You're like, oh, that's definitely a playable character. Like, they look different than NPCs, but they don't have that like really protag energy of like, I'm a super important character because look at all my cool bells and whistles on my you know what I mean? Like, I just think that that's one thing that Hoyoverse does really well with their character designs, is they put a ton of focus on the small little details. Every little detail, every angle is considered, every little pixel put on that character is there for a reason. And I think that kind of like intentional character design is really good, because there are a ton of gacha games out nowadays, and a lot of gacha games kind of do this thing where they just generate a bunch of like tropes. Like, you have the big mommy character, you have the big daddy character, you have like all these characters that are meant to fit like anime tropes, right? Like, they're essentially just an anime archetype, like, converted into some like random gen kind of feeling character. Like, that's how a lot of gachas feel, in my opinion. It's because like, the character isn't really, it's not built with a bunch of care and attention to detail and focus on side story and lore and background and integration with the lore. It's just like, oh, this character exists to fit a specific trope, and we just kind of forced it to happen. So anyway, talking about differences in character design, stuff like that, changes to other characters, allow me to introduce some changes regarding the characters' appearances. We added more idle animation, so that's cool. Added more poses, that's cool. Gotta love that. That makes the characters feel more real, more immersed into the world. Fully upgraded all the characters in appearance, texture, body shapes, and details. So I think that if you go through and you can see these models right now, they definitely look a lot better. Some of them got more changes than others. Like some of them were dramatically changed and some were just kind of like tweaked a little bit. But like I think that these designs that we're seeing right now look really good. Like there's so much attention to detail we're seeing in the redesigned character models. You can see that little bit extra put in there, that secret sauce, you know. So yeah, some characters went through minor adjustments. Like you remember her from the very first video and from footage and stuff. She looks slightly different, but you can still see definitely the same character. The main characters, these are the main characters. They've gotten slight redesigns. They look neater. And then other characters got major adjustments, like complete redesigns and stuff. So this character you may not even recognize from that one character showcase trailer, but she was in there. She was the one that was sitting on the bench. And I think that she's the perfect example. She kind of just looked like a generic character, right? Like, and now she looks like she has a lot more personality in her design. So more than one new character. So based on where the company is based out of in China, lion dancing is really a big thing there. So they wanted to incorporate that into the game. So they made a character that's focused around that as their combat style, as sort of like an homage to lion dancing. And I think it looks really cool. This character looks really cool. Like their animations and stuff looks really neat.
OK， 没有问题。还有一名会出现在测试里的新角色，就是剑心。剑心表面上是在荆州茶馆里。
Another new character. You can obviously see that like the new design philosophy was for sure used here.
太极招式，太极讲究接化发。那么我们其实也给剑心设计了独有的格挡招式，希望给玩家带来公平。
Very cool animations as well.
那么多的就不多说了。
Gotta love it.
去体验这名新角色。
关于角色美术，我也想问一点，因为我一直在关注明朝的社区嘛。从社区外放的视频看，其实很多角色的功技、技能特。
I don't really know what this is about. Visual effects and stuff. I'm not really sure what that is about.
那么其实在这一段时间，我们对角色的
So camera movements, I definitely remember people talking about that. Like some of the camera movements were a bit awkward during battles because like you have some like fast moving bosses, stuff like that. And like here's some examples of befores and afters of like skill animation, stuff like that. And you can definitely see the improvements there. They look really good. Just animations in general improved. Yeah, so that camera movement improved. Good stuff because it's a very, very combat focused game. A lot of that stuff is really important that they get the camera and everything correct. Yeah, frequent camera. I remember people talking about this as well. There was a lot of camera shake and it made some people like feel nauseous and stuff. Like it's like not good. It definitely was a bit too intense. So like that's before. And you can see that like when some of those hits register, like it almost is hard to keep focused visually on the screen. Yeah, so like there's the lock on right there with the camera, kind of smoothly panning over from the enemy attack so that you can follow and track the attack very easily. Rather than just like whipping around, you know what I mean? Well, the fights were thrilling. They were fast-paced with frequent changes in camera angles, so like the enemies going from side to side, dashing all around, teleporting, stuff like that. I believe we've made significant improvement to that issue so far. For starters, the lock-on target feature Yeah, should be more stable. Each monster design, every skill even now has their customized camera tracking. So they literally created custom camera tracking for like all the attack for the enemies to verify and make sure that you get a good combat experience, which is cool. Switching between your characters triggers like what's called a QTE, which is like a swap in, swap out attack. And just asking, are there updates regarding that combat system? So there are some updates to the combat system. This is referred to as resonance energy. It's like above the health bar, and when it fills up, if you swap characters, the character swapping out does an outro skill, the character swapping in does an intro skill. So you get sort of like this cool opportunity to like synergize the characters and work their intros and outro skills together to get different benefits and stuff like that. Some of them will be straight up attacks, some of them will be buffs, some of them will be all sorts of stuff. Like if you have a healer, maybe a heal, something like that. Like as they leave the field, they heal the character coming in. Stuff like that is really cool. I've seen some stuff like that from Zenless Zone Zero, where they have some interactions where like instead of swapping characters and the characters just like boop and instantly replace each other, they have some interactions where like the character that takes the field runs in from behind, from like out of camera into the camera, which makes it seems like they were just like waiting right there for you to like tag them in and stuff like that. I think stuff like that is really cool. I'm not gonna lie, because that's just like such a smart improvement on like one of those gacha mechanics, like with Genshin. You know, it's an amazing game, but that is one of the little bits of awkwardness in the game, is that when you swap characters, they just like poop, they just like instantly replace each other, and it's just kind of this weird, like, you kind of have to get used to not seeing all of your party members on the field at the same time, you know what I mean? And I feel like having that sort of like ability to sort of be like, oh, they're just like behind the camera. Like they're just like just out of view, you know what I mean? Like I think that sort of helped. Okay, that was a long tangent.
其实战斗部分算得上是明朝的一个强项了，玩家们既可以通过一系列简单的操作就打出酷炫的连招，同时游戏里也保留了一些细腻的操作空间。
Yeah, so essentially saying it's a exciting combat system for both inexperienced and people that want to challenge. So people that are like new to combat stuffs and people that want challenging combat, we're all welcome here. Everybody's all welcome here. So they improve the combo system, enhance battle feedback, kind of see a before and after here of like moving between skills, and you'll see that it's significantly smoother in the second one. You can cycle through the skills a lot faster because the animations kind of like seamlessly transition rather than having sort of like this space between them. So yeah, this is a cool system in the game called echoes, where like you defeat monsters and sometimes they drop like a hologram of the monster, and then you can use that echo to like call upon the monster's power in fight. So you can like either summon them or turn into the monster temporarily or something like that. And this is actually a really cool system that like I think like you can see some of it right here, where they like redid one of these attacks and stuff like that. I think this is a really cool system. I think it gives you a lot more reason to like go out and farm and collect these monster things, and it's just like collector stuff, you know what I mean? Like I think stuff like that is definitely good for these kinds of games. So they're using one right here to parry, so that was like an echo that they used literally just to parry an attack, which is kind of interesting. So some of them will just be attacks, some of them will be parries, some of them will be probably support related stuff. They redesigned the gallery for these so that they all have like sort of like figurine versions of them, where like once you unlock the echo, you can go through the gallery and look at them. And again, for collectors, extremely important. People that love collecting stuff love this kind of stuff. Added new gameplay during open world exploration. Every now and then you will encounter some special echoes. They will look different from other normal echoes. They are rarer to find. So they're like shinies, like in Pokemon, like shinies. So essentially like special versions of echoes, and people are going to be keeping their eyes out on that for that as well. I'm sure there's going to be people that like farm those. They're talking about upgrading and stuff like that. Just like, you know, making sure that the game is like balanced to be fun. Like there's obviously going to be progression systems, but they want to make sure that like they're not too challenging or stressful for players, that they're not too arduous. People had complained about it in the previous closed beta test, that they were kind of a pain in the butt to farm the echoes. So like if you get one that you like and you want to try to get it with like different substats or different like stats on it, then like refarming it was a pain in the butt. So now if you find one copy of an echo that you need or want, and you want to like farm it for different stats or whatever, you can go to a specific location and do that. Like literally choose what echoes you want to farm, as long as you've already got like one copy of it. I think that's fantastic. That's a really good balance for that, so that you don't have to like rely on like RNG drops for monsters to farm for your echoes, to farm for the substats that you need. So you can collect echoes in the open world. Are there other things that you can do? And they're saying that was one of the feedbacks from the last closed beta test, from the first one, that there wasn't enough in the open world. There was kind of bland. There wasn't enough enemies. There weren't enough challenges. There weren't enough stuff like that. So new gameplays, new challenges, stuff like that. New battle experiences. Yippee-ki-yay. So they have like some boss challenges, stuff like that. Special echo can drop from completing these challenges, so like incentive to do them, give you some kind of like bragging rights for completing it. It does seem like there's more content to explore. We want it to be an action-packed open world RPG. It's striving to add more combat. Honestly, I'm still kind of nervous about players will think about the changes we made. I think that people are willing to be a lot more, like in general, people are being, I'm going to go ahead and back away because that was pretty much everything. I think that people are willing to be charitable when they feel like their concerns are being addressed. Like maybe Wuthering Waves isn't going to be perfect, but the fact that developers are willing to listen to the player base and take feedback about the game so that they can improve it and stuff like that, that says a lot to me. Like, I think people are willing to be charitable when they know that like there's a potential for things to be fixed and worked on down the road. People get frustrated when they feel like there's zero chance of their concerns being heard, of people, you know, responding to what they're talking about, stuff like that. So I understand that the development team, they're nervous, a lot's riding on this game for them, stuff like that. That's totally understandable, but again, shows that they care. They have been listening to feedback. And generally speaking, like look at a game like Helldivers 2. When people feel heard and listened to by the developers, a lot of goodwill is built there, like a lot of goodwill, and that can do a lot for a company. I think companies don't really think about that as much anymore, like how important that like goodwill is from their player base. But anyway, now what we're gonna do is we are going to look at a couple pieces of media that took place, kind of showcasing the second closed beta test and as well the trailer for the official launch of this game. Now I will say, I just want to say this real quick, pre-registration is going on right now. If you want to get rewards for when this game launches and stuff like that and help kind of boost the marketing for this game, all that great wonderful stuff, I highly recommend go pre-register right now. That way when the game comes out, you get some free stuff. It's good times. It's wonderful. I think we're getting like some pretty major rewards because there's been like 30 million pre-registrations. 30 million is a lot. That's a lot. Like that's a lot. And I'm really excited to see how many people tune in and play this game when it comes out on launch. But yeah, highly recommend going and pre-registering for that game right meow. And yeah, let's go ahead and watch the closed beta test 2 trailer. So this trailer will show kind of everything that we just talked about. So we're seeing some of these redesigned environments. A lot of really cool set pieces we've seen right there. Weather effects. gorgeous. I mean, look at that. Cutscenes. Gotta love seeing cutscenes, even though we don't know what they mean. Obvious bad person. It's obvious. This is a cool looking boss that I don't think I saw prior to this video. Kind of excited to fight this boss. Looks cool as heck. So we're seeing like the reworked character designs. We're seeing the new animations, new everything. Like, I mean, it looks like the amount, like the difference between the first closed beta test and the second is really impressive, because you have to consider like how much of the game they actually touched up. Like redoing 90% of the story plus all of the graphic fidelity being kind of reworked and having environmental set pieces redone, animations, like they kind of hit almost every aspect of the game in polish. And 9 months of that polish is really impressive, what they're able to do with that. And that also just, you know, this game will continue to get updated after release, obviously, but starting at a really strong point like this, I think is really cool. The music, super epic. We're seeing a lot of really cool scenes here, like glimpses at cutscenes that look so epic. Can't wait to see the story. That guy looks awesome. Awesome. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to jump straight to the next video. We're going to watch the global launch trailer for the game.
One of the Threnodians will soon be reawakened. They are the enemies of human civilizations.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
I heard you've lost your memories.
If all of these have something to do with your true identity, then who exactly are you?
So we're seeing stuff, right, that we already talked about, but this is
Moreover, you
going into
possess
more
a
of story
similar
stuff.
ability with the legendary hero who once absorbed Threnodian. Jue prophesied about your arrival. After all this effort, do you truly want to throw it all away?
Ultimately, I suppose it is up to you to discover the final definitive answer for yourself.
No matter
That
what
boss
happens,
looks really
my
cool
soul
too,
is
actually.
always yours.
Kind of
Here
never really
you
noticed
are.
that for some reason.
Besides,
This character looks
not
super
seeing
cool.
The opponent heightens the thrill of
Love
the
her
game.
design.
Do you want to be the rule-setting shepherd or the rule-breaking black lab? Now, Rover, the story is yours to spin.
Cool. Super cool. Short, sweet, beautiful, wonderful, amazing. Right. Okay. So I know this is kind of a lot to go through, but this leads us up to sort of showing that this game, in my opinion, has kind of a lot of potential. I'm super excited for it. I do have a Discord, and I'm gonna make a Wuthering Waves section so that people can talk about the game, play the game together, share their experiences, all that sort of wonderful stuff. So if you want to join a friendly gaming community, hit the subscribe, the like button, comment, whatever. And I will have a Discord link either in the pinned comment, in the description of the video, both. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And yeah, I'm just so excited. I will be streaming this game on launch. I think I have to work on launch day, so I'm either going to be streaming it before I work or after I work. I'm not really sure. Either way, yeah, I'm so excited. I think this game is going to be really good. I have high hopes. I have really high hopes for it. Having actual competition for Genshin, again, I think that is incredibly important in this market. It's something that we're actually sorely missing. All right, well, that's all I have for you today. I don't want to drag this out any longer than it already is. I know this is already super long. I'm going to edit and try to cut this down as much as possible. So if you stuck around for this whole video, I super appreciate you. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope that you're also excited for Wuthering Waves. I hope that the game's launch goes really well. I hope that Kuro Game gets good recognition for the hard work that they've done, and I super look forward to playing and kind of like covering the game. I'm not like gonna do a bunch of guides. I'm not gonna do a bunch of stuff. I'm probably just gonna like talk about the game. How's it doing? How are people feeling about it? Stuff like that. Maybe more like community oriented stuff. And I hope it's good for my channel too. Like, you know what I mean? If the game does well and I do well because the game does well, then I'm not gonna be too unhappy about that, am I? Anyway, that's it. That's all I got. I will catch you in the next one. I have a Dragon's Dogma 2 Let's Play that I've been doing and releasing and stuff. I'm like on episode 7 or whatever. So there's like, I'll try to link that or something somewhere, sometime, somehow. And you can check that out if you want to. But yeah, I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, stay healthy, stay happy, drink some freaking water.